Om yatadipo nivataste ningate so brahmasmrita yogino yatachastasya yunjatam yogam atmanaha. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. Like a candle in a windless place, its flame steady and unflickering. So too is the mind of the yogi, gathering power from the practice of yoga, sitting in deep meditation upon the Atman, as advised by the Vedanta. Om peace, peace, peace. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us, may that Brahman sustain us, and may that Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. SRV welcomes you into its weekend loka, Saturday being 2 one-hour events, satsang and what we call God blogs, where we dive deep into these subjects, like the one we're taking today, which is the third class called Vedanta's Perfection and the Storing Up of Power of Yoga. So I chanted from the Bhagavad Gita in that instance where Krishna is telling Arjuna how the yogi sits in deep meditation, focusing on the Atman, and that in that way stores up inward power, which is different than the power we've been bringing up to scrutinize, that we've been looking at in terms of nature's power, both the outer power called beauty and the inner power called destructive / pleasurable. So in the whole scene of nature, we see this attraction to pleasure and aversion to pain, which again has been brought forward by Patanjali in his teachings in the Raja Yoga system. It's also called Ashtanga, also called Patanjala. He was, I think, the only great seer in India that ever had the system named after him, and he didn't do that himself. People started referring to yoga at a certain time, and he had composed the 8-limbed yoga for that particular age, because we know he comes back to do so, as all the seers do. Then they said, well, that's Patanjali's system. We should just call it Patanjala because he did such a masterful job on putting it together. I myself have said that other than the Tantra, which is actually not a cohesive darshan, it's so old, so ancient, so widespread, and therefore so technical, which is what I'm getting at here. The yoga system, 8-limbed yoga system, is the most technical, I find. And so one really has to be grounded in the teachings of it, know the vocabulary. There's some of you who are taking Raja Yoga from me, and the several hundred that have taken it from me individually in the past, which is also coming forth in a book that we have, which has a commentary of Swami Vivekananda, Vedavyas, father of Vedanta, and my own commentaries in it. We know that one needs to qualify oneself in yoga. Maybe you'd say that, well, as people are saying, I got a mantra from a teacher and now I'm busy practicing that. That's my practice. Good. Holy Mother encourages that. But you wouldn't necessarily have to have a lot of technical knowledge to practice the mantra. You could ask people who received the mantra, what does it mean? And they say, well, I'm not sure, I'm just repeating it out of faith. And then mantra could get a little technical, more technical if you connected it to, say, the word, the teachings on the word Om in India. And then all of a sudden you'd find out, oh, this has a lot more to it than I thought. So I used to say a lot, and I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, that the word Om was new to America when I was on the scene in my 20s and my teens too. Went to New York in my early 20s. I saw it spray painted on a rock once. Somebody had found out about Om, so they knew how to write it, and they'd put it there on a rock right in Central Park. So I looked at that, kind of saluted it, and then walked away. And then people were having it on T-shirts. I still think I have my old gray T-shirt what I wore when I was in my 20s. It had a big Om sign on it. And people were putting it in, of course, black light posters on their walls of their brownstone apartment buildings at colleges where they lived. And so that's back there in the 60s and into the 70s. But very seldom did you ever hear anybody speak about it with any kind of wisdom that was attached to it. You just pretty much repeated it, and that was good enough. And that would be fine, say, if you had a Mahavakya or a great saying like Om Tat Sat or Tat Tvamasi. If you just knew basically, oh, what it means is just that thou art. What's that mean? That Brahman. You are that reality. And so this is good information to hear, and probably for most people, again, is going to need some qualification before they'll even believe it. Because our whole society, its religion here in the West I'm speaking about, and our upbringing has been undermining that kind of wisdom. We never heard it from our parents, from our religion, or in universities. They didn't support our yogic power, our Atman. In fact, if you look back, it was all about, you cannot be that. You're imperfect, you're a sinner, and various forms of that came forward as teachings. And so the mind kind of preponderant with these negativities. So in Vedanta and Yoga, your mental perspective is very important. You really have to be in an affirmative mode. So that's a positive side of the teachings. If you want to go negative with them, there's a positive negative side you can go with. That's called neti neti. So you can renounce, throw things out, clean out your attic, get thee behind me, as Jesus said, and do it with a negative practice. That's a positive outcome. But it's double negative when you're taking away people's true nature and not telling them about it, and you're substituting it in its place. Take that out of the way, call yourself a sinner. So, or that I'm imperfect. So it's very important that we get this affirmative perspective from the seers. And Yoga and Vedanta are of course, very good about that. Yoga will do it in terms of, here's a practice you can do so you can realize it. Vedanta will come at it, so you're already that. So we've got on two sides here, these great darshanas that we're talking about in the last 2 Sundays, and today and next Sunday we'll cap it off. And if you remember, in the first Sunday, we were looking very deeply at when you do come to store up power, or let's say when a Westerner got the opportunity to store up power, the first kind of power they're looking at is in nature. That's external nature. And then the next kind of power, if they get over that, let's see, some people maybe lose their sentimentality about scenes in nature. Although I've known old people that, keep saying up into their 80s and 90s, look at that beautiful tree. And so science finally looked into what the tree is made of. So we have that teaching in Buddhism and Vedanta that there's the outer tree, which is not the real tree. It's important to know that. It's a vibrating particle tree. And that's the next level of the tree, or any object. It doesn't have to be just a tree. So now you've got, more the real tree is just vibrating particles. And if you came to understand that through yoga science, it would mean the world is empty. I should birds have nests, foxes have holes. I should not lay my head here. But if you came to realize that in a sense of it's empty, and so I think I'll look for something else. And when you examine the emptiness of particles, atoms, molecules, quarks, and so forth, then they discover this great atomic power in them. So those 2 kinds of power we looked at 2 classes ago, those I'm calling power that deludes, power that has a facade, power that trips you up, power that hypnotizes you, power that leads you to destruction. Like when you found out what the atomic particle contained and you thought, oh, this can be useful so I can dominate over others. Well, that's what we want to look at later today if we get the chance to it. Look at some of these occult powers, one of them being, they're ancient teachings, one of them being domination over others. That's been there, and of course India knows about this because the Romans tried to conquer them, Attila the Hun tried to conquer them, the Muslims tried to conquer them, and India pretty much remained up until more present times in a state of ahimsa. Oh, come on in, share my 84 types of mangoes, and take some with you home if you want. No, not all of them, please, as was the case with England later. But they were pretty much open to sharing the bounty of the earth. And you could say, well, how generous of them. But then you could also say, actually it's because their seers saw that these things were empty, that they wouldn't fulfill them, that they were changing. Like, say, this year we're not getting a crop of mangoes because it didn't rain enough. And so they just took it in stride. And my God blog I'll put out tomorrow, if you want to get a little preview of it, is 2 kinds of non-reactivity, I'm calling it. That is how you react, in how people react in 2 different ways. And one's healthy, like the story is that Sri Ramakrishna faced a huge storm at Dakaneshwar once, and trees were being uprooted, flying by in the wind. See, it was such a powerful storm. But the thing Sri Ramakrishna noticed the most was people just looked out the window and went on cooking their meals and eating it. Their house was about to fall down around their ears, and they just went on with mundane things. See, so that's fearful kind of non-reactivity. It's like the ostrich sees a tiger coming. I think I'll hide my head in the sand. See, and that's its way of dealing with it. That's not a very wise type of non-reactivity. But another kind of non-reactivity is, you're sitting at the dining table with your family, and a tree whips by your window. And you say, did you see that? And go back to eating. See, so you don't react to phenomena because they're happening all the time. Storms are coming, going, tornadoes are going by, floods are happening. In India, they know a flood every year, called a monsoon. Once a year, they know that kind of a flood. So you just get used to the phenomena of nature happening on all sides of you, and you don't react to it. So what about death, they ask him, and dying? He said, death also is the same. You don't react to it because you can die, but you're still here. He said, you're not dead when you die, is how he put it. It's a very disarming way of saying it, but that follows the Advaita teachings that the soul can't be destroyed. Second thing he said is that when you kill another, that person is also still here. You can't kill them because the Atman's eternal, immortal, and they're the Atman. So it follows, whether you look at it, from the shock of non-reactivity, of reactivity, or you look at it from the wisdom of the philosophy, it follows. And so then he says, then they ask, I still don't understand that, how you can't react to death and being killed. And he said, water is water, whether it's still or in waves. You see this big body of water called an ocean. Sometimes it breaks into waves and sometimes it's still. But the waves just become part of the smooth surface of the ocean, and then they'll rise up again and manifest themselves. And then they'll sink back into the ocean again. The ocean doesn't care. He also used the analogy once of a big tree putting off leaves. It doesn't really care where its leaves go. The wind will take it anywhere. Into a gutter, he said, in a churchyard, into a graveyard. The wind will take the tree's leaves and blow it into good and bad places, or positive and negative places, or dangerous and non-dangerous places. And the tree just sits there still shedding leaves. So he says, why is that? They ask him one more question. We still don't understand. He said, that's because the niche and the lila belong to the same reality. So he put the final non-dual capper on it. See, the niche, that is the eternal Brahman, which is that vast ocean that you can't find a border to or a boundary to, and its play of waves belong to one and the same reality. and it's unchanging. We looked at that last week, right? We looked at ajati and parinama in this left column of this chart, and we read down all these descriptions of why consciousness is unchanging. It's not born. Not born ajati. It doesn't have a birth, so it can't die. Or put it that way, it doesn't die because it never had a birth. It's probably a more effective way of saying it. Or look at it in terms of a parinama. It's changeless. It's unoriginated. There's no origination in it. There's no beginning to it. And they can't find the beginning to it. And when they do, they attribute it to a Big Bang. They attribute it to energy, basically, the sun's energy, like back to the power of the energy in atoms, right? Somehow a bunch of those got together and exploded like a sun, and that gave us our beginning. So that's as far as we can trace it, our beginning back to physical origins. But it's not only physical origins, it's origins that the Rishi denies. It's the origins of energy itself and the origins of thought. They also deny that as being the ultimate reality. Remember last week we said chicken or the egg, which came first? Not a very good question to ask in a Buddhist or a Vedanta circle, because they know that Buddha nature, or call it Brahman or Atman, whatever you wish, is present before form is created. It is the mother of form. So isn't a chicken and an egg a form? So what was anterior to that was this consciousness, and it's not the garden. You can't like go to run. Don't ask Adam and Eve this question, Swami Vivekananda used to say, because they don't know the answer, obviously. So you can't take refuge in some physical garden, because that has lots of chickens and eggs in it, and you get confused by all this manifestation that's going on. And so you propose a question amongst a whole host of unanswered problems that never gets an answer beyond the physical. And so people become confused. And this is what deceives them in nature. If they believe nature to be the reality, then they get deceived. And so this is what's been going on in this world since time immemorial, basically. We can't just point to the last 2,000 years and say we fell victim to it in the West, because that's obvious. And people are taking in nature hook, line, and sinker. Objects, pleasures, new inventions. And not very many of them are tracing it to the inventive mind, their intelligence. So that will be next week's seminar, or next month's seminar. We're going to talk about how you can connect these outer phenomena to an inner place. So this is actually, these 4 classes are a good introduction to that subject that's coming. And so all of this by way of warming us up again after 6 days have elapsed. I hope you've looked back and studied some of what has been proposed here, because basically it is a proposal from, it's the truth to us, but we realize that when we hand it out to a world that is probably not very deep even into religion, not that you can blame them because of the state of religion today, but it doesn't know what's beyond religion in terms of spirituality. So it's very difficult to have a spiritual life. That was in one of our God blogs last week. So keeping up with everything that's being freshly introduced to you right off the edge of Divine Mother Kali's sword. That's what SRE is doing. It's cutting every week, every day, into the falsities of an unreal world, and cutting open a vista for you to look at every day of the week, so that you become absolutely convinced of the existence of a birthless, deathless, changeless reality, out of which everything else is springing like waves and disappearing back, springing like waves, disappearing back. When we were talking about that, because that's the Vedantic perfection of this topic, remember our topic is Vedantic perfection and storing up power of yoga. So let me remind you that when we were talking about storing up power of yoga, we were looking at nature's twin powers. You could call it internal and external. And now we're going to look soon at the intellect's, mind intellect's inner power and how that begins to lead it astray too. That's called the occult, psychic phenomena, not just physical phenomena. And it would be actually very good to connect the physical phenomena back to the psychic phenomena. But that's not being done by any science except yoga science. And that's based upon Samkhya science much earlier, that they looked at everything external, made a list of things, had you, later on you had to meditate on them as alambanas, put positions to meditate on, not so you could own them or covet them or gather them up or store them up or barter and trade them or attach to them, but so that you knew that you were not that. That's a statement about why yoga looks at the 24 cosmic principles through meditation, so that it can determine, I see, I'm not water, air, earth, fire, water, and ether, the 5 kinds of ether even. I'm not tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, and seeing. About this time, if you've convinced yourself, neti, neti, not this, of all of the truth of all of that, then maybe you can start to have a spiritual life. Because then man does not live by bread alone. What are the senses seeing, hearing, touching, and tasting with? What is the movement of fire and water and air currents? What are they moving by? You see, this follows with a yogic scientist. So they'll look and they'll say, there must be a different power around here somewhere. But these 2 powers led me astray, made me think that the power was in nature. And this power is going to make me play with it. That is the psychic power, thinking that I'm on the right track, and pretty soon I can dominate over the nations with it and cause hell and destruction everywhere. But this power I've never looked at and found yet. And back to what I was saying earlier, because nobody's ever confirmed for you that you're a perfect soul, that your nature is perfect. And when I say your nature, I don't mean this nature. We're using nature in 2 different ways. Your divine essence is perfect. So when you get about the time to this, you're beginning to store up powers by meditating on the Atman. That's why I chanted from the Gita to start this chant. You say, well, I can sit here and meditate, somebody told me recently. And I think I'll just do that and not read the scriptures. I said, but you can meditate for years and years. And that won't do away with the delusion in your mind that caused you to fall into this problem. There are great meditators, like professional meditators, just like there are professional priests and professional scientists, but they're only going surface deep. That's why this image caught my attention for this chart. They're either floating to the surface or going only so deep as the occult powers, but they're never taking the deep dive to know the yogic powers. And that's what a realized soul has done. What do we call them? Saints, seers, sages, luminaries, abhaduts, avatars. I mean, there are words all over the place. Rinpoches, Swamis, Tulkus in Tibet. So these beings are there amongst us, and they're exuding, exemplifying the wisdom that they got from storing up yogic power. So as I'm saying, in meditation, nothing stores up, but just I've got some peace of mind. What meditation does to most people helps them to realize that they don't have to be active all the time, because there's no peace in action, not unless you've mastered inaction. But most people haven't mastered inaction. So that's what meditation will teach them. Oh, I can sit here and be peaceful for a while. But it doesn't get rid of their negative samskaras. Only Jnanam will do that. So you have to dive deep into the scriptures. So I told this person, put together meditation with Jnanam. That would be my advice to anyone who is thinking that maybe one is not good enough. One is not as good as the other, or I should choose one. No. Do them both. SRV is a 4 yoga institution. Ramakrishna Order is a 4-yoga organization. And Krishna, that's one of the earliest teachings of Sri Krishna in India, is 4 yogas. Chaturdasha Yoga, you'll find it in the Gita being taught. So this is all the swift delivery of picking you up to look at the whole warp and woof of what we're doing here over the last 2 weeks, and then continuing on with this, because this is what we stopped with, as you remember, when the class time ran out last Sunday. We had looked at those powers, which is why I just gave you a review on them, in order to arrive at some teachings about the perfection of Vedanta. Why you don't have to use it as a practice. It's more just a statement of truth. Here's finally someone that just said, here's what we realized, and we'll give you the conclusion. You see, it is the apt conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Aresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagat Cha Akanda Rupasti here. It's Akanda, Satchidananda. So when you get that statement given to you, these higher statements given to you, then you know that Vedanta has concluded something. And then it's presenting it to you right now in the terms of 108 Upanishads. And we think the greater Vedanta will cover all of the Prasthanatrayam. That it'll cover the Upanishads, it'll cover the Bhagavad Gita, it'll cover the Brahma Sutras. And there'll be lots of other hidden fashions in it too, in, we might say, Swami Vivekananda's Neo-Vedanta. People are using that phrase. So you're getting a lot coming forth from this as statement of fact. And nobody gave you that, right? Nobody's ever given you that. Your parents, religion, school, even high-minded university. Oh, you're learning this, because you need to be perfect, or you're learning this to get knowledge, so you can be knowledgeable. But nobody ever said, all that's already within you. So this is one of the most essential pieces of value that the Vedanta holds. That it is the only one, Advaita Vedanta, I should say, it's the only one of the philosophies of India, and it's the only one among religions that is coming out and supporting you. You are perfect, you are pure. Your nature is immaculate. Not immaculate conception, please. Don't go to Adam and Eve again, because it was never conceived. Its mind does all the conceiving. The great mind is, people hear the Advaita Vedanta, but some of them throw the Mahat out the window. But well, wait a minute, go back to the Samkhya. He talks about Mahat being the very first of these, earliest of these tattvas out of which everything came. So just because you take Brahman out of the picture as a creator, it doesn't mean that it takes the creation away. It means that there's a great mind somewhere that's doing this. Try finding that. And what did the father of yoga said as you stored up power? Use air, earth, fire, water, and ether, then use touching, tasting, hearing, seeing, and smelling. Meditate on each of those, connect them back to the subtle senses, and then to the mind, and then to the intellect. And by the time you've done that, you'll begin to see the great mind. It'll step forward and introduce itself to you. That's called the Mahat, the great mind of God. So this is a piece of information probably good to add in when we start talking about something that's non-transformational, unborn, unchanging, absolute. Because then people would maybe jump to that and say, well, say the world's an illusion. No, don't forget the Mahat. He's not going to like you saying that. See, if you're talking about Brahman, talk about Brahman specifically and leave it formless and pure. If you're talking about the world, don't forget the Maya, and be careful of it. But if you're talking about the Mahat in between, you'll find the Leela. You'll find this divine play, see, that great souls are participating in. Some beings come back to this world of birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, and forego all those or forbear them just to get to the beauty of the communion between Shiva and Shakti. They want to see how consciousness disports itself. That's in a teaching called the 4 feet of Brahman, which, is waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya, as we talked about last week. Is that yesterday and Saturday? So these are all things to keep in mind in the press of this high-minded realization called Advaita and the still dangerous presence of the world-bewitching Maya. So when we jump to this chart, after we looked at the powers, the bewitching powers of Maya, you might call it, we went through 8 things here. Let's show you, so we get on with some of the chart action here. And sorry that my iPad, first generation iPad, stopped working after whatever 10 years, but now I'm, so I don't have to crane my neck. Please pardon me while I view this chart on the laptop. When we went through this then, and I'll just take you through it. In fact, I'm not even gonna, I promise myself, I'm not even gonna make a comment about any of these 8 things. I'm just gonna read them. Now you hold me to my promise, because my intention is to wander away and start commenting when I hear these things. But let's just pose these as a great soul would pose his foremost student. Foremost student comes forward, he says, here's what the Advaita is. It's the self alone is, it negates a second principle, followed by Brahman alone is real, all else is just appearance, followed by false identification of the self with the non-self is the cause of your bondage. Then bondage is the result of ignorance of the self. Then freedom is attained when ignorance disappears. Disappearance of ignorance entails disappearance of the non-self. Freedom is the essence of self. Loss of freedom is a case of forgetfulness. And finally, where we ended last week, the self is always free. Freedom is never attained, it is realized. And then the teacher signs off and walks back into his cave or into the forest, you see, or down the seashore, and leaving the student with those 8 bits of tantalizing, deep, high-minded, Advaitic conclusion. Can't say philosophy, can't say practice. And he calls back down the beach or in the forest, can you come back and repeat that once more? See, I really felt something powerful in that, but I've got to hear it again. The way you put it was just so succinct. And I want to see it written down. So here's where the scriptures are born. So the student went and wrote all this down from his great memory, because that's what the Arhats did with Buddha after he passed. Some 500 of them got together and said, we've got to write that down, what he told us in the wilderness, after his nirvana particularly. So, and that's become the Dhammapada, this ancient ground scripture, I'd say, of all of Buddhism. So this is what would happen here with a person who's a deep adherent of the Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual philosophy of the ages. So we stopped at 8 there, and the way I think I might want to someday comment on this chart myself in another way is to be the student and hear the teacher say this, and then the teacher feels the question coming up in the student's mind, and before he can say it, he says this, you see. And then that causes another question to start to form in the mind of the student, and he quickly says this before it can be spoken. That's the way I read this when it goes along, because you can bring up, well, why was I in ignorance in the first place, you know? And you say, well, that's because, you know, you were ignorant of the self, and you fell into bondage. And then after that could be, Well, how do I get rid of that ignorance? It disappears when you get rid of the non-self. So each answer has this clarifying effect on the mind of the aspirant, till it leaves no wiggle room. I think I was saying that last week a lot. There's just no way to deny the truth. You cannot, it's like, you get thee behind me. Christ was talking about devilish things, but you can't get this behind you once you heard it. You'd be foolish to do that. So with that as an introduction further to this chart, let's look at as these, and think of it this way, maybe as you hear these, is that you're the student and you're hearing this from a great teacher, and what question's rising in your mind, but hold on to that question till you hear what's the follow-up truth, axiom here. These isn't called, pillar of axioms. So 9 is, after hearing the self is always free, and having that qualified by saying, in other words, you cannot attain it. It's realized. So this is what happens to the mind. Like when a Zen, advanced Zen student finally gets Satori. The Roshi's been waiting for this forever and leading him on. All of a sudden it dawns in the mind. So everything that led up to that experience of Satori was brought out of the inherent powers that were already in the Zen aspirant or the yogi. And it all of a sudden effloresced. It's just like light when the clouds part and the sun comes out. Immediately there's the light. So number 9 here, and I always hear my teachers saying this because in Bengali accent, he always turned the V's into B's. It's a Swami Vivekananda, he'd say, So wherever he was quoting Shankar, he'd say, Vyavaharika, and the people jump out of their seats. Sometimes he used that as a way to wake old Western men out of the seats in the pews there at the Vedanta Society. Vyavaharika. Basically, it means the impediment to freedom is outright preoccupation with the objective world. So, as Holy Mother said, give that up. Give up your personality too, if you can, and be free. Give up your desires and be free. So how simple is that of a teaching? But we know how hard it is to do if somebody's ensconced in, say, the power of beauty of nature and the power of atomic power. See? But how much more difficult it's going to be for somebody who's made a habit of it for lifetimes, like the Prakriti Layas, the demigods, the asuras, and that cross-section of your ancestors, which are earthbound. As soon as they leave, they're already heading back to earth. So this is why this Vyavaharika and Paramartika is its opposite. See, this is how what Shankara probably added into the explanation of the beautiful axioms of Advaita Vedanta. He's just talking about Vyavaharika, but he had to give you the opposite. Paramartika, the absolute truth is there. But then there's this preoccupation with objects. Phenomena, if you want to put it that way. 10, Vairagyam. The solution for obsession with relativity is cultivation of detachment. So, if you were there with an Advaita Vedanta teacher and you were a student that was not waking up very soon, you'd say, well, I'm going to go run and do whatever I do to get detachment. See? But that's all done in the mind, isn't it? You're attached in the mind, so detachment has to happen in the mind. You can't be attached to something in the mind and go outside and get rid of your attachment in the world. It's in your mind. You could get rid of the external thing and still feel it haunting you in your mind. So you don't move it. Teacher says to him, you're not moving an inch. Just do what I told you right now. Detach. Do it in here at the root. Find where your obsession is. Like Swami Vivekananda told one person, how do I be free? He said, I want you to go and collect everything in your mind that's an attachment or that you brood about. Put it in a blanket, in a bag, cinch up the bag, throw it in a nearby river. So this was how to get free. And, it's you might say up to here, we've gotten almost no mention of anything other than the perfection of Vedanta and freedom. But here all of a sudden, oh, I see, you're not understanding me yet. Maybe we should put it this way. And so this is where your practices begin to enter in. But you have to be very careful that these aren't practices that you do like asana or breathing exercises or exercising, running or jogging or giving up meat for a week or something like that. Fasting, for instance, the way we were in the West looking at these things back in the 60s and 70s, I think I'll do an austerity here. That is pretty much, a lot of it was for show, because you'd go up to your friend and say, I just fasted a week. And you know the intention behind that was to impress people. Oh, you did? Wow, that was really amazing. Maybe I'll try that. And then just the thought of fasting made you go and feast. You know, because that's the way the mind is. It says, I want to get away from that idea. I'm just going to glut out tonight. See, then I'll feel good. So this is why you have to get rid of detachment in the mind, both to feasting and to fasting. As you hear about fasting and your desire for feasting comes up, there you are. You know what to do. It's a duality, and you're going to have to neutralize those dualities. So cultivate detachment. Then manomoha. So long as the mind sees a separate self, there is bondage and fear. So this is beautiful, I think, is that Vyavaharika and Vairagam sort of run the risk of falling out of the heights of Vedanta, of Advaita Vedanta, right? But all of a sudden they bring you snapping right back into the whole fold and tell you that, you know, that this is sort of an echo of one of the early statements that, you know, as long as you believe in an ego or a separate self, so long there will be bondage and fear. So in the, you know, in the Upanishads, in Shankara and the Upanishads both, they have those beautiful slokas that they recite, write down when they have these kinds of realizations. That Ananda Brahmana Vidvan Nabhibeti Kutaschaneti says basically, those who realize this Supreme Brahman, they dispel fear and doubt for all time. And so it is. So this is how they would come at you with further validation or proof of the fact that you're still coming before me thinking yourself to be a separate self. You're not coming at me saying I'm one with you. And how many students would do that with their guru anyway? So, you know, even reverence and worship, ritualism and so forth, put you apart from God, ultimately speaking. So this is where a practice is to do a ritual, a puja. And a practice would be to come before your teacher and sit before him. But when will you come into either one of these things, knowing that what I'm worshiping, it came right out of me, and my guru is none other than myself? When will that happen to me? And why, oh why has it not happened to me yet? Or has not happened to me over lifetimes? Why am I holding on to these limited ideas? So that's how dangerous a separate self can be, an ego. So Holy Mother would say, please forget about your ego and your personality and remember your true self. She would just tell you straight out. Because you're coming to her thinking, well, this is the mother of the universe. She sort of looks like just an ordinary village woman, but I've heard from great souls that she's like the mother of the universe herself. So I better approach her with, you know, care, you know, bring her some gifts, and I better not touch her feet because she might contract my imperfections. I don't want her to do that. But if she saw you and saw that you were reticent to come touch her face, that's what I'm here for. Come and touch my feet. Because she probably knew that person didn't have a chance of a snowball in hell to do it for their own practices. So this is, again, I think a strong leaning back to that fact that when the separate self goes, bondage and fear goes. So where are bondage and fear in you? This would be inquiry, right? This isn't a practice, it's a Vedantic go-to move. Where do they exist inside of me? Like the Upanishad says, after it reads you a teaching like this, where will your fear be then? Like when you realize me, where will your fear go to? It might as well be saying, where is it now? Where is it coming from? And why aren't you locating it and kicking it out with the spring cleaning out of your attic, out of your bats in your belfry, you see? Raising dust every time you want to do something real and powerful. So I stop there and pause on number 11 because you can see how the atmosphere, the wave of, if you want to call it the vritti of teaching of Advaita Vedanta, is high, and it's like a graph. And all of a sudden, oh, it's got to come down here to help a certain soul's understanding. But they're going to snap you right back once they think you might have that understanding. This is what's happening here. It's not letting you fall too low below the ground of existence. Number 12, Kam Brahm. Freedom consists in seeing nothing but the self. So when you've diminished that separate self in you, and you're ready to say, I love you, Lord, with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my understanding, and I'll try and love my neighbor like you, like myself. I can't promise that yet, this day and age, but I'll try and love nothing but you, Lord. Then this is what the Lord, as it were, we're waiting to hear through that single ear. There's a single eye, there's also a single ear. Kam Brahm, it even sounds very comely. It attracts you to the ideation of it. And so what you might want to think there, if you're an enterprising student, what a student of an intermediate level and a student of an advanced student might be thinking when they heard that. One would be thinking, I have to realize there's nothing but the self. The other's going to be thinking, wow, that's the most beautiful state called freedom. I want that right now. One's thinking of freedom, the other's thinking of how to get it. So this marks a strong difference too between levels of aspirant. They hear the word moksha, and Shankara follows up. It's a state already at hand. It's like much like this, only flash ahead some hundreds of years to Shankara's time with his students, and one of them asks him and so forth about that. He tells them, that this is there's nothing but the self, and that is a state of freedom, realizing that. And so the person immediately thinks or asks, how do I get that? You can't get it. I already told you that up here. It's never gotten, it's realized. So immediately tells them, it's a state always at hand. And instead of putting it in other ways, he jumps a move, like a good chess player, on his student. He thinks of a new way of saying it. He says, it can't be gotten. It's a state that's always at hand. It's not something that even you lost and found again. This is what you live in. You see, how can you live and not realize your own essence? Are you an animal, plant, or an insect that doesn't know what it is? Or are you the self-realized soul whose essence should be seen as what makes you live, what makes you breathe, what makes you think, what makes you practice, and what leads you back to the ultimate goal of human existence, moksha, mukti. I've said it before. Go find words for it in other religions. I'd love to hear them. But it's like a main focus in India, and it goes hand in hand with formlessness. Like you can't get it with ego, so if the separate self's there, you're not going to get that. If the mind's dual, remains dual by nature, you're not going to get that. If you have attachment to objects and you can't get rid of that, You can't get detachment from them. You're not going to get that. It's not going to be available to you. So you're going to have to go a different route, follow these great teachers, and think differently. That's why I said earlier, mental perspective is so important in Indian Darshana. You become what you think, or you are what you think. So if you think sinner, that you'll be. If you think saint, you might attain that. But if you think I'm free, always free, ever free, never bound, one day you'll wake up and the song in India sings, my delusion was gone, gone, utterly gone. Who can contain the truth? Who can tie a blazing fire in a cotton cloth? This all transpired and awakened, flashed in the mind of the soul. And so I'm never going to call myself bondage again, bound again. Neither am I going to call anyone else bound. They're just angels unawares. You read that poem in Swami Vivekananda's book of poems. They're just angels unawares. So he looked at us Americans, he said that, they're just sleeping, and some of them may awaken, because that's what happens, when it's forgetfulness. You're sleeping in forgetfulness. So remembrance is going to be what you're going to add in, right? You're not going to go out and go to every temple in India and try and find out the footsteps of the rishis. They're long gone. They and their footsteps are gone. They all came out of here and now go back to here, and plug in the solution for forgetfulness. If you have to, memorize their words, that's what they have you doing as a practice. That's yogic practice. That's connecting with your powers again. We got to get to some of this. And here's like the nuts and bolts. You'll find this is why Samkhya and Advaita Vedanta are so much alike. The self is Brahman, not to be confused with the body-mind complex. Body-mind complex is, has some 20 or 24 things in it. 5 elements, 5 subtle elements, 5 senses, 5 subtle senses, 4-fold mind. Right there, you've got 24 things. And then add in, fourfold mind, of course, includes intelligence and thought. So now add in that mahat that we mentioned, that you're approaching by taking all these back towards it. Where is the locus? Where is the locus of all of this? Where is that land or that place, that specific space where all this came rushing out of? I want to see that. And I don't want to see it anymore just to see how beautiful it is, you see, as it comes rushing out. I want to see it so I can go beyond it. What's the thinking of these great rishis? It's like a salmon trying to get upstream. They have to jump a 8, 10, 12-foot waterfall, of all things, and fail again and again. You've seen those shots in nature? That's what the soul is trying to do when it's trying to get beyond the mahat. I have to get past that moment of supposed origination, where things get created. I don't really care anymore if they're created or projected. I just want beyond it. The philosophy shored me up, as it will do. Now it's time to do something about it. So that point 13 lucky 13 comes down to that, you see. Basically, it starts to sound like Indian religion. Indian religion was what gave you, you're body conscious, you're not the body. That's Hinduism 101. Later on, when you got into intelligent interpretations and modes of that, it was telling you you're not the mind either. So it had lots of surprises for you. But aham atma, aham etat na manaha. I'm not the mind, manaha, nor its thoughts. And I'm certainly not the body. I learned that early on. Followed by 14, aham chaitanya. What am I then? I'm not the ego, but the ego really is a form of consciousness. It's only limited and distorted by the ignorant mind. So if I can remove this ignorance from my mind, my ego becomes, this is how you get close to the Ishvara. See, That's the supreme personality, they call that, or the Godhead and so forth. So I'm not being able to get close to it because I haven't taken the bath yet. See, you don't want something smelly near you. So if I still think, I'm a body, my nexism with poor thought thinking, with skewed intellect, and say I'm still thinking a body composed of filth and flesh and bones and all of that, then how can I get close to Ishvara? So that means this is a point by point, end of days practice for your old preoccupation with the 5 sheaths. Somebody put out the Adara system because of that. You're not the 5 sheaths, and here's what the 5 sheaths are: body, prana, thought, intelligence, and a sense of ego, see, that likes its bliss given to it on a platter. Those 5 things I'm not. That pretty much took the 24 cosmic principles of ancient times in India that Kapila gave us and slimmed it down to 5. So Pancha, 5, has always been the way of Indian philosophy. 5 senses, 5, there's 5 everything out there. So the ego that you're trying to deflate or overcome is actually consciousness. It's at the top of those 5 sheaths, isn't it? So basically everything is playing up and into it, but it's grabbing all the glory from those things, and it's getting attached to the power that will come from the intellect, psychic that is, the thoughts and inventions that will come from the mind, the feeling of elation that will come from the flow of prana, from your ancestors, from heaven to earth to hell, and the sense of I am the body. It's taking all of that. Yep, that's me, and I have it. I own it. It's mine. See? But when they tell you in Advaita, rather than give it up, see, and some people have tried 1918, it didn't work for them. See, then think of it as consciousness. Identify with it. Identify it with Brahman. It's like one monk said to Sri Ramakrishna, I've got lust still. As a monk, what am I going to do? How can I destroy that? He said, oh, you're trying to destroy it? You'll never be able to do that in the human form. Turn it towards God. Lust after God. If you're angry, be angry. Others have realized God, but you haven't. Use the passions: lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, shame, fear, all the fetters and all the passions are to be turned. So this is where point 15 begins to smack a little bit of the tantric side of things. This is what they came to realize when they were working with people, and that what some of the practices of old weren't working for that particular race at that particular time. So they began to introduce those elements of the tantra into it, and followed up by this nice piece. The ego enjoys limited happiness. The self enjoys limitless bliss. So no wiggle room, right? Basically, if he finally came down, by the time the first 8 went by and he wasn't getting it still, she wasn't getting it, then they had to go through all of these permutations and changes to convince him. When he finally came down here and gave him the concession that the ego actually is consciousness, he didn't want that to confuse him, so he followed up by saying, but the ego enjoys limited happiness. Yourself enjoys limitless bliss. So who's going to choose wisely, see? And that ends those 15 points, which I'm calling here in this chart, Advaita Vedanta's pillars of actions. Gaudapada says in his quote down here at the bottom, the Atman in its dynamic phase diversifies other entities, all set up within the mind. Thus, the shining Atman imagines itself by itself through its own Maya, which is also the apt conclusion of the Upanishads. So there is nothing outside of the self. We already know this. Call it God or Brahman or Atman, whatever you want. So if nothing outside of it, everything's contained within it. So what is this machination that you're falling victim to? Like, I'm ignorant, I'm imperfect, I'll never get realized. Where's all that coming from? Guess what? You're manufacturing out of the power of your own self. Where else would it come from? And so then can't you reverse the process and destroy those erroneous thoughts and those false ideals, right on down to the sense of the ego itself? Just take it away. And so Gaudapada puts his expensive 2 bits in there, important 2 bits in there. And I searched the Karika for something that would nicely end or conclude this study of Pillar of Axioms. The chart is In Footfalls of the Rishis, which is the new book we put out with 300 such charts on different topics of India's philosophies and religion. So you may look that up and read the commentary in there, and hopefully see this class again when it gets put out. And now, with the time remaining, so we keep the steady flow going, let's look back, because I have kept half of my promise to you to not only tell you about power that gets stored up in yoga, although we haven't gotten to the good part of that yet, but I've also shared with you what Advaita Vedanta is really essentially about. It says it so well in such short, compact, thought bombs. We were using that word last week. But you have to think of each of them and put them in an order. Each one of them is precious by themselves. But like I was saying, the order of them is fantastic for training the mind. Training the mind, every time it has a thought that slips away from the main point, it brings you back to it. And so that, I think, is the underlying precious note of this particular chart, is to begin to see them all as a flow. With commas, semicolons, and periods, and then capital letters again, to start it, keep it all fresh. So I recommend it for study, for manana. Looking back then on the delineation of power, this has earned us the right to go on to look at the occult powers. And you can see them listed there. I'll just flash this chart at you. The Astabala Siddhas are over here. And it says, Anima, Lagima, Vyapti, Prakamya, Mahima, Ishitva, Vashitva, and Kamavashayita. That's the ancient list. Nowadays, you look up 8, if you want to look up the Astabala Siddhas, because some people are, I don't know why they're doing it, but they're putting it forth as something maybe that you'd want to attain. But from Krishna to Ramakrishna, we see the bookends in philosophy telling them you do not want to have any contact with these. They're like crow droppings by the side of the road. But whole cultures and whole nations and whole worlds have fallen into contact with them and seen their opportunity to use them. So I think we ought to look at it from that side of things. And so those 8, sometimes you'll see 2 or 3 of them changed to a different word, but that's basically giving you an old rendering. Now let's see here if which one of these is going to set us on a path. Yeah, let's do this one first. This is a nice look at power there of that kind, a good image for that. True meaning of siddha, because we know the word has several different definitions in Sanskrit. For instance, siddha can be anything like hemp, or ganja man, marijuana. It can also mean these powers, which should not be coveted, according to Sri Krishna. It also means perfection. There are siddhas out there. You kind of have to be a little wary when some strange person comes from India or somewhere. They say, well, he's a siddha. What do you mean? He smokes pot? No. I mean, like, he's perfect. How perfect? Is he a siddha of the heaven realms? Or is he a siddha of spirituality? So you have to use your discrimination, be very careful when that word is used. But here, of course, we're just using it as it is shown to us in the scriptures. So think of the list here. I'll show it to you again. These are the 8. And then we can now look at what they are all about. Let's take anima first. Power of invisibility. Lagima, power of weightlessness. Vyapti, power of all expansiveness. Pakamya, power to fulfill all desires. Mahima, power of glorification. Ishitva, power of domination. Vashitva, power to attract, of attraction. And Vashitva, power of attraction. Oh, yeah, I got Ishitva. And finally, Kama Vashayita, power to enjoy. So a quick look at those. This particular chart puts them side by side with the 8 great accomplishments. If we have time, it'd be good to look at them. But if you want to trust me, or you don't want to trust me, you can trust the great seers, because next to the 8 occult powers, which they say you shouldn't be seeking, utilization of psychic prana for personal gain is basically what they're all about. Like that figure on our chart who's, staying in the middle of everything, tempted to go to the surface and not taking the deep dive. They're caught in that level of power. So just reading these down really quick, the ancients said the really great accomplishments are the 3 primary siddhis. Remover of suffering, you see. Interpersonal suffering, external suffering, and cosmic suffering. It's a teaching shared as far back as Lord Kapila, right up to Lord Buddha. These 3 types of suffering were considered great attainments if you could acquire them. The 5 secondary siddhas are pursuing a spiritual path, knowledge of scripture, concentration and study, that is mastering it, gaining a guru, disciple, friends, and compatriots, and achieving self-purification. Do they look anything like these? Now, these are all aspects of a good, balanced spiritual life. And these are all aspects of power that take you away from that spiritual life. So it's worthy of mention to put those side by side. There's also a teaching that came upon, which is nice to put here. How about the 6 treasures of Godhead? If you want something that's probably beyond yogic power, that you're storing up when you get to that level, then you can see that Brahman itself has these treasures, and great souls look to them. So that to try and find them, they find Brahman, they find those powers. So that's Shri, Bala, Aishvarya, Tejas, Vijnana, and Chagi. So resplendent light is always assigned to Brahman, like the Brahman effulgence. And then infinity, no end, no beginning, no middle, as we were saying about the expanse of Brahman. Bala means glory or power. So this kind of power, of course, is connected to strength and lordship, Aishvarya. So these 2 really should be seen together because they go together. The Lord's power, as is in the case with the avatars and the great realized souls that come out of the Lord and embody here on earth, their power is for your good. That is, they want to use any power they have to lift you up out of suffering. That's why the 3 kinds of suffering are put early, you see, and help people out of suffering. So their idea of power and its usage is entirely different than the Prakriti liars who seek utilization of psychic prana for personal gain. Then We see the next one is Aishvarya, strength and lordship. We're just saying that. Then Tejas is splendor and radiance, particularly gotten from austerities. Tejas begins to emit out of the very pores. So if you saw Jesus had an aura, or if you saw Buddha was shining with light in the forest, or Holy Mother saw Sri Ramakrishna emitting light when she was with him, and that's an aura that's called Tejas. That's the Lord's own power coming out of, it comes through the soul into the intellect, into the mind, but it even comes into the body and causes a radiation. So people see, an aura around certain souls. Then Vijnana, wisdom or truth. That would, of course, be a very high level of treasure of power of the Lord. And Chaga, renunciation, transcendence. Probably most people want to stay away from that. But it's considered as one of God's favorites. The last on the list means it's really the most important. In other words, when you renounce everything for the Lord, then you'll get the Lord. And then you'll understand what non-duality, samadhi, moksha, mukti, freedom, and other words mean. Then only you'll really fully understand, because you will be one with Brahman. Sri Ramakrishna says here, a true lover does not seek anything from God except for pure love. He does not seek miracles or occult powers. To such a one, the 8 occult powers are like crow droppings by the side of the road. Famous quote by him. And Krishna says, you will not succeed in realizing God if you possess even one of the 8 occult powers. So I would like to put those 2 quotes out from the bookends of India, Krishna to Ramakrishna. Don't leave out Ram before him. But to all people who out there thinking that we should be teaching the 8 occult powers to people so we could have a better society, like that's ever happened to people who got into power. So you should look at this, and this gives you 3 types of siddhas or powers. So I think that's a quick look at the occult powers, but let's take a deeper look at it side by side with what's called Dharma Mega Samadhi. So if you were seeking the Lord, realization of God with form or beyond form, then, and sorry to double up on you here, but then these Pancha Maha Siddhas, the 5 great siddhas, 5 great perfections, which are listing under yogic power, right? You're going to be storing up, by the way, here in the treasure chest are those 6 we just looked at. But the Pancha Maha Siddhas is what we're looking at here. If this figure will take a deep dive and get beyond occult power, after getting beyond the powers of nature and attraction, to name and form, and dive down into its own essence, that's where you will find this gem of love lying pure. Dive deep, O mind, dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty. There you will find the gem of love. Or put it, gems of love. So as Sri Ramakrishna was saying about true love, and Krishna was saying about false practices and siddhas, then you can have this understanding of the nature of siddha side by side with what the yogi is seeking. So here, let me get this up. And we'll look at occult powers next to the rain cloud of virtues. I meant to make this quick and sort of painless for everyone, but the main reason I'm putting it up, and in this context of 3 kinds of power, and in the context of side by side with true power, is that particularly beings of the Western society, it may be able to give them a look at the actions they're perpetrating. War, Basically, I'm talking about war and violence on others. If they were to understand that these powers are misleading and they haven't gotten the clue yet from the karma that has been wrought by going to war so many times, by continuing playing with the powers of nature, their preoccupation with guns in the early West, all the way up to tanks and missiles in the contemporary times, then possibly philosophically we can reach them, or those people who are beginning to doubt them. And so beginning to doubt your government and what it's doing with its weapons and its money, also wealth being one of those occult powers, then maybe this could go a long ways towards clearing your mind so that you can not just doubt them, you can resist them. And you can renounce everything that they're doing that's karma forming and that's destructive to your friends, to your family, to your nation, and give up this false patriotism that they're trying to foist upon you via violence of all things, as if Jesus, the God of the West, did not condemn violence. So it's all a lot of hypocrisy, and so it helps then. I won't go on the political vein, kicking a rather dead horse right now, but basically if we look at this chart, you can see next to what the categories I put them in, right thinking leading to divine life and enlightenment, and on the other side of the chart, wrong thinking leading to suffering and rebirth and ignorance. It can't be put probably much clearer than that. I'll leave the quote at the top. It's a famous quote by Vivekananda to the end. But there you see actually at the top of the two pillars, the actual Sanskrit words for Astabala Siddhas. We already had them. Anima, Lagima, Vyapti, Prakamya, Mahima, Vashitva, Vashitva, and Kama Vashayita. You can look in Footfalls, again, find this chart that we were looking at, and you can run down your own riot act on that and make comparisons to true treasures and true powers that the yogi and the Lord have in their possession, and therefore eschew these sets of 8 powers. Don't need to go much deeper into that, but there's this thing called Dharma Mega Samadhi, and let me read the quote that I said I was going to save by Swami Vivekananda. He was studying Patanjali's Raja Yoga Sutras, and he came up with this conclusion. He says, "Herein lies the secret. Says Patanjali, the father of yoga, when a man rejects all superhuman powers, then he attains the rain cloud of virtues. He sees God, he becomes God, and helps others become the same. This is all I have to preach. Doctrines have been expounded enough. There are books by the millions. Oh, for an ounce of practice." So when he wrote that in a letter and said it to others occasionally, he was bringing forth the Patanjali Yoga system and saying how Patanjali himself accented the rain cloud of virtues in the teachings. And Father of Vedanta, Vedavyas, got a hold of that too and made a mention about it. So all the way up to our present times, say 1893 to 1902, when Swamiji was here twice in the West, he was looking back on the ancient scriptures of a couple thousand years ago in yoga, where they stored up power, and saying that this is what, when you give up power, you get this. So that caused me to think, wow, let's put those false powers next to these Dharma Mega powers. Now, Dharma Mega means rain cloud of virtue. Dharma Mega Samadhi is an actual experience the seers have when they've done their practices, they've studied, they've meditated, and so forth, and all of a sudden this stroke of enlightenment hits them, and they realize that everything that they'd been seeking outside was within them. That's the easiest way to say, I don't have to go looking for courage. I don't have to go looking for purity. I don't have to go looking for this. It's always been within me. And they have direct realization of that, and they live like that. It transforms them outwardly. The inward transformation was happening all along, but you couldn't see it. But now they've got, it's like quality started pouring out of the air as raindrops. Oh, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. I'll take great merit. I'll take Dharma. And take them to myself and back to where they come from, inside of me. See? So these are the powers. And this then takes us back to chart, the difference between what you store up when you sit in meditation, when you read a scripture, when you go hear a class by your guru, when you do karma yoga for others, all those yogas and good things, that's what's storing up as you do it. And you're saying, oh, I'm not enlightened yet, or I don't feel enlightened, or when am I going to get such and such a level of attainment? When am I going to be like the seers? When can I join the great ones? It's been storing up all of those things, and what comes of them have been storing up inside you the whole time you've been placing your mind on reality. If you can get your thoughts placed on thoughts on reality alone, then it'll come quicker, like in monasticism and so forth. But for the householders too, the more you can give to that practice of your energy and your time and your thoughts, the quicker this Dharma rain cloud is going to pour on you. And you will feel it, and you'll say, this is more like it. Look at me 20, 30 years ago, and look at me today. See, what I was dealing with before is all gone. Like, who can destroy the truth? Who can cover the truth? It's now upon me. And there's no going back. It's destroyed all ignorance in me. See, back to this chart of Swamiji, right? How ignorance gets destroyed by realizing the self. So I'm hammering away at that for a minute or two here to show you that this Dharma Mega Samadhi, when it manifests, is this. This is what happens. And why does it happen? Because when he rejects all superhuman powers, like these, what we're talking about here. And so he just said no to them when they came up. Others said yes to them. Take me to where that power is, in the atom, in my psyche. Let me go there and manipulate these. Let me become great. What's that? Mahima? See? The Mahima, let me become great. Let me impress others. Let me look good to others. Let me be able to fulfill all my desires. Am I getting through? And this is what people think to be everyday life. No matter what happens to other people when they seek these things. You see, it's to be disallowed. I cannot step up the back of the ladder of existence on the backs of my brothers and sisters. It's jealousy. As Vivekananda said, he saw it happening in modern day India when he was there. Jealousy was the worst problem. And he came over here and saw that jealousy wasn't so much in the West, that we were helping each other. On the other hand, we were helping each other to the wrong things. Well, here, let me help you with this Uzi for Christmas, you see. Or the set of tanks, Mr. General. I'm helping you here, you see. Or a big bank account so you can do whatever it is you do in the realm of the 8 occult powers. So less than, since we are coming to the end of this class, and it'll put us in a good position for looking at yogic power next time. Let's run down this description of the 8 occult powers in English this time. So first, warlike and domineering, and this is wrong thinking. Wrong-kitty, wrong. No, slap your hand. See, whatever we have to say to these puerile people who have got the reins of power in their hands. It's warlike and dominating is wrong thinking. It causes people to suffer, and it'll cause you to be reborn in ignorance. Selfishness and covetousness, that's wrong thinking. You should be open-handed and free, distributing the goods of the world, not coveting them to yourself. That's like right in the first few slokas of the Ishavasya Upanishad. Do not covet the goods of others. It's like right there in the Sanskrit. Jealousy and meddlesome. and being meddlesome, materialistic and possessive, curious and manipulative of nature and its powers, bingo, attracted to psychic powers, uses life for enjoying desires, and tries to influence others through wealth and vanity. Finally, seeks mastery over the world, like all of the people we called great, Napoleon, Attila the Hun. Oh, look at, they were so great because they almost conquered the world. When's somebody going to finally do it? Bring it all under their domination. How are you going to like that when your freedom's taken away, even out here? Let's contrast it really quickly in the few minutes left to what the Dharma Mega Samadhi is. You see in Sanskrit there, sahasa, samatya, kshama, alochana. That's a beautiful word. Mriduta, udarata, sauharda, vinaya, mitahara, dritti, hri, dina, and yukti, and etc. You can't, the list of Dharma Mega Samadhi, these are prime picks. So what are the prime picks? Which are really come to you by right thinking, leading to divine life and enlightenment. There are people by the hundreds and thousands who are thinking this way. So just because there's just a few people here and a few people online, and nobody else is listening, that's because you're in the Burloka. Wake up. Wake up and smell the Kali, as we say here in SRV. Waking up is remembering your true nature and knowing that all of these Dharma Mega rain clouds are in you. All the drops from the rain cloud, high qualities are in you. So that's what Advaita, that's why you're putting it with Advaita Vedanta. Doesn't that say that's my perfection? And doesn't Vedanta been telling me that? So here's another system that comes on and said, oh, you want to know some of those things that are in you? Prove me wrong. And they have been proving people wrong. There's a few thousand of us that are right thinking, but there are millions who aren't. So what is the right way? Nonviolent and peaceful, generous and content, gracious and indrawn, God-loving and unattached, transcendent and respectful of nature. Bingo on this side, you see. I mean, because it's really both of those sides where you were using nature and its powers was here. And then all of a sudden you got transcendent of nature and began to respect it as a manifestation of Brahman. There you have it. That's the contrast we want to make as far as these first two kinds of surface power go, and how to distinguish them from true power. Uses life for God realization. That's a mouthful. In the 5 minutes remaining, I cannot stop and comment on them, but I could give a class, really talk about each one of these. Strives to attain and share freedom with others, rather than to put people under your hand, dominate. And seeks mastery of the self. Back to what we were saying with Swamiji's beautiful chart with Advaita Vedanta. The whole thing is to remember your true nature and be that. So that's what you're seeking, not mastery over nature. How far has that been done? Who has ever mastered nature? And when they did, what did they do with that mastery? Even if they got it for a little while, you see. So that's it, as we say in Hawaii. That's it, brothers and sisters. We have a very good side-by-side comparison of the hidden evils versus divine qualities. When we look at the Astabala Siddhas and the power that people covet on one side, and the Dharma Mega Samadhi that the seers tell you, not only tell you that you need to have them, tell you further they're already in you, and the best way to get them is to wake up and realize the fact. So that will take us to a good place next week where we can look at storing up this power, because I have a whole sort of inner directive about thinking about that for 3 weeks now. And the fourth class, which is the last one next week, has got me thinking about how this power stores up. I was mentioning it a little bit about when you do your practice, it's already storing up. So we want to take that perspective to heart and go on with our practice. So it will store up. And it will, Mother, Divine Mother, as we say, will lead us to that place that when and where we will use that stored up power. As you see in great souls like Swami Vivekananda, who came here and gave us these teachings, and himself used all the powers of Dharma, Mega Samadhi, and told us about how they occur in Patanjali's Yoga and Vedavyasa's Vedanta. Jananim Sharanam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toye Shritva Pranamami Mahur Mahur Pranamami Mahur Mahur Om Brahmanandam Parmasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dvandvaititam Gaganapadrisam Tattvamashari Laksham Ekam Nicham Bhimamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tanamami. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.